Autumn, 1838. Soldiers arrive at a Cherokee farmhouse in Georgia without warning. A family has minutes to gather what they can carry and leave the only home they've ever known. What comes next will push their family across 1,200 miles of American soil in the dead of winter. But something survives. Something no soldier could take. That's the story hiding inside Cherokee DNA. If you love the kind of history the textbooks leave out, subscribe. We dig up stories like this every week. To understand what survives, we have to go back further than 1838. Back to a mystery that sat unanswered for over 100 years. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, one nation spoke a language that didn't belong there. For over 100 years, experts couldn't explain why. This language's closest relatives lived hundreds of miles north, near the Great Lakes. The people who spoke it were the Cherokee. They had lived in the mountains of North Carolina and Georgia for as long as anyone could remember. And yet, this same nation built a full writing system from scratch. Within a few years, almost every adult could read it. They wrote their own laws. It seemed like a tidy explanation. That explanation left something out. For generations, historians told the story the same way. Cherokee people were farmers. It's a fair description, and it's mostly true. European settlers were amazed by Cherokee government. They even gave the Cherokee a nickname, one of the 5 civilized tribes. That respect made sense by the early 1800s. In 1827, the Cherokee wrote their own constitution. It set up a court system. It set up an elected leader too, just like the United States government. A Cherokee man named Sequoyah had invented a writing system for the Cherokee language. He built it in 1821. Before that, he couldn't read or write in any language at all. Just 5 years later, almost every Cherokee adult could read. In 1832, the Cherokee won a case at the U.S. Supreme Court. It was called Worcester versus Georgia. The court ruled that Georgia had no legal power over Cherokee land. It was a generous story. It was also incomplete. Look at the other nations of the Southeast: Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole. They all spoke related languages. Those languages come from the same family, called Muskogean. Cherokee didn't fit that family at all. Cherokee's closest language relatives were Mohawk, Seneca, Oneida, and Cayuga. Those groups lived hundreds of miles north. Why? The old answer was simple: isolation. The idea was that Cherokee just drifted apart from its neighbors over time. It stayed alone in one place for centuries. But that doesn't explain something important. How did an entire family of related languages end up clustered in the north? Why did Cherokee sit alone in the south? There's a second mystery. It's even harder to explain. The Cherokee endured a forced march. It killed a massive share of their entire nation. All in a single winter. History gives us a preview of what a disaster like that should do to a group's DNA. A generation later, the Navajo endured their own forced march, called the Long Walk. In 2013, a researcher named Erickson found it caused a genetic bottleneck, a sudden drop in population that makes the genes less varied. This bottleneck raised the rate of a rare disease called xeroderma pigmentosum. That disease makes skin extremely sensitive to sunlight. Today, it affects as many as 1 in 30,000 Navajo descendants. That's the expected pattern. A bottleneck is supposed to leave damage like that behind. How? Isolation doesn't explain that one either. Something else was happening, on both fronts. The first theory is called the Southeastern Homeland Idea. It deserves real credit. Old evidence found in the ground shows something clear. Cherokee ancestors lived in western North Carolina going back to at least the year 1450. That evidence is unbroken. DNA taken from historic remains in the region backs this up too. It shows the same core genetic markers found across indigenous groups throughout the Southeast. Cherokee ancestors really were here, farming this land for a very long time. They grew corn, beans, and squash together in the same fields. They built stone traps in rivers to catch fish without ever blocking the water's flow. But this theory explains the old evidence in the ground. It does not explain the language. Look at the great earthen mounds across Georgia and Tennessee. People often credit them to Cherokee ancestors. But that's wrong. A different people built them entirely. Those people were the ancestors of the Muskogean-speaking Creek. The Cherokee arrived later. They either replaced the Creek or merged with them. The homeland theory explains the roots. It leaves the language unexplained. So researchers proposed a second idea. It's called the Northern Migration Theory. Language experts compared Cherokee to the Northern Iroquoian languages. Those include Mohawk and Seneca. Scientists have a method for this. It measures how long ago two languages split apart. In 1957, linguist Hopkins used that method here. He calculated the split at somewhere between 3,500 and 3,800 years ago. Old physical evidence backs this up too. Pottery styles show it. Burial practices show it too. Both point to a slow move south, down the Appalachian Mountains, over hundreds of years. Cherokee ceremony tells the same story. Take the Cherokee stomp dance. It's a nighttime ritual. Dancers circle a fire. They wear rattles made from turtle shells. This dance looks almost the same as ceremonies still performed today by the Haudenosaunee people of New York. This is strong evidence. It solves the language puzzle cleanly. And yet, even this doesn't explain what the genetics are now showing. Picture one large group moving south from the Great Lakes. If that really happened, researchers would expect something specific. Cherokee DNA closely matching groups like the Mohawk or Seneca today. Instead, Cherokee DNA shows heavy mixing with nearby southern groups. It's not a clean northern bloodline. It's a much messier one. The language moved north to south. The genes tell a different story. Buried in Cherokee DNA is a rare genetic marker called X2A, and it doesn't fit the pattern at all. It's passed down only through mothers in a kind of DNA scientists call mitochondrial DNA. In 1990, a researcher named Schur described something that held up for decades. Nearly all indigenous people in the Americas carried one of 4 such markers. Then a 5th one showed up. X2A, it appears in Cherokee people. It also shows up in the Ojibwa, the Sioux, and the Navajo. But it's completely missing in Central and South America. Every other marker in this group has close relatives. Those relatives still live in Siberia today. X2A doesn't. Its nearest relatives live somewhere else entirely, the Near East, Southern Europe, and the Caucasus Mountains. That's thousands of miles away, on the wrong side of the world. That gap led scientists to 3 different theories. One is called Beringian isolation. Beringia was the ancient land bridge that once connected Asia to North America. This theory points to Kennewick Man, a 9,000-year-old skeleton found in Washington state. In 2015, a researcher named Rasmussen led a team that sequenced his DNA. They found an early version of X2A inside it. The theory argues X2A developed right there in Beringia, before people ever reached the rest of the continent. A second idea is called the Solutrean theory. It notes something odd. Ice Age stone tools from Europe look almost the same as early tools found in North America. This theory suggests ancient Europeans crossed the Atlantic Ocean directly. But there's a problem. If that were true, the oldest X2A should show up on the east coast, closest to Europe. Instead, the oldest known version, Kennewick Man's, was found on the west coast. A third possibility suggests something different. A shared group of ancient people once lived in Central Asia. That group passed genes to both early Europeans and early Native Americans. But scientists have never found the in-between DNA that would prove it. Put simply, X2A most likely split off from its distant relatives long ago. Scientists think this happened between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago. It then entered North America through an ice-free path east of the Rocky Mountains, after thousands of years isolated in Beringia. Kennewick Man's DNA closes the door on one popular claim that was never proven, that X2A came from a recent crossing linked to ancient Near Eastern or Jewish migration. In 2015, researcher Raff and her team rejected that claim completely. What the evidence really shows is bigger than any one theory. Cherokee ancestry was never just one migration. A newer theory is called the multiple wave theory. It argues something different. Cherokee identity formed from several genetic groups. These groups met and combined long before Europeans ever arrived. Cherokee DNA carries X2A alongside several other distinct genetic lines. This mix fits a Cherokee tradition that's well documented. Cherokee clans adopted captives. They adopted defeated rivals. They adopted allies, too. This happened generation after generation. That kind of genetic mixing raises a question nobody's fully answered yet. What would this same kind of mapping reveal in other groups, ones that haven't been studied this closely at all? Imagine standing in Cherokee territory in the winter of 1838. You are one of about 16,000 people. Soldiers have pulled you from your home at gunpoint. You've spent weeks locked in a crowded camp full of sickness. Now you're walking 1,200 miles toward what's now Oklahoma. The cold is brutal. A disease called cholera spreads through the group faster than the soldiers can control it. The elderly die first, the ones who carried the family stories and histories in their memory. Then the infants die too. Historians believe between 4,000 and 8,000 people died on this march. That's about a quarter of the entire Cherokee Nation. This disaster was built to erase a people. Instead, it packed together what survived instead of scattering it. That's the paradox nobody expected. This isn't a theory. Military and tribal records from that winter confirmed the deaths. And what they suggest is almost impossible to accept. Not a single Cherokee infant survived the coldest part of that winter march. The deaths hit hardest among two groups, elders and infants. Those are exactly the two groups that carry a people's memory forward. They also carry a people's genetics forward. By every goal behind the removal, this should have wiped out Cherokee identity for good. Instead, in 2003, researchers named Bolnick and Smith compared two groups. One was the Eastern Band. They descend from about 1,000 Cherokee who escaped capture by hiding in the mountains. The other was the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. They descend from those forced onto the march. What they found wasn't supposed to happen. The surviving genetic lines weren't watered down. They were packed together instead. The disaster did lower genetic variety. It did speed up genetic drift, too. That's when random changes happened faster in small groups. But something else came out the other side. A clear, strong, shared genetic signature. This is the answer to the question isolation alone couldn't reach. The very thing built to erase Cherokee identity ended up making it clearer and stronger. This is one of the biggest flips in the genetic history of any indigenous nation on this continent. In the late 1800s, a researcher named James Mooney sat down with Cherokee elders. He wrote down their oral histories. One story kept repeating. A migration south from the Great Lakes, long before Europeans arrived, fleeing old conflicts. For decades, historians dismissed this story. They called it a myth, not real history, just a story. Then the language and genetic evidence caught up. Scientists finally showed Cherokee elders something new: the genetic link between Cherokee DNA and northern groups near the Great Lakes. The elders weren't surprised. They knew it right away. "We always knew that," one elder said. "Our oral histories have carried the memory of the Great Lakes for thousands of years." The genetic proof arrived 124 years after Mooney first wrote that memory down. It arrived at a place Cherokee oral tradition had never really left. Even with all of this evidence, there's something DNA can't do: decide who belongs to a tribe. Researcher Tallbear and tribal governments agree on this completely. A commercial DNA test might show Native American ancestry. But that means nothing for citizenship. None of the 3 official Cherokee tribes accept it as proof. Citizenship is a legal question, not a genetic one. It requires a solid paper trail, one that traces back through old family records. There are also gaps in the ancient DNA record, and those gaps may never close. Ancient DNA from the southeast is very rare. The region's acidic soil breaks down bone and tissue fast, much faster than the dry southwest or the cold north. Whole chapters of early Cherokee migration may simply be lost forever. But what the soil couldn't preserve, the writing system did. The written record survived exactly what the DNA record couldn't. Now, step back from the Cherokee story. The question gets much bigger. One nation carried its DNA, its language, and its culture through a single disaster designed to wipe out all 3. That erasure came through forced marches and boarding schools built to strip children of their language. It also came through a century of legal battles that followed. If Cherokee identity could survive all that, what else is hidden? What other stories are locked inside the DNA of other indigenous communities around the world? On the Sea Islands of South Carolina, Gullah Geechee elders trace their West African roots. They don't need a lab to do it. They use old farming words and language patterns that their communities kept alive for hundreds of years. Different people, different ocean, same truth underneath. Genetic science isn't inventing these identities. It's simply catching up to what oral tradition already knew. This pattern keeps repeating. Scientists map a new group closely, and the same thing happens every time. A community was told its own memory was just folklore. Then the science finally caught up to what its elders had been saying the whole time. The Cherokee were never simply what old textbooks described. Those books pictured a fixed, unmoving people, judged civilized or not by outsiders who never bothered to ask. They were, and still are, something far more layered. Ancient DNA in their bodies traces back to a population isolated for thousands of years, long before humans even reached this continent. Their language proves a migration across half a continent, and they survived a forced removal meant to destroy them. Instead, it left behind one of the clearest genetic signatures of survival on record. The Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, the Eastern Band, and the United Keetoowah Band all still stand today. All 3 still perform the going to water ceremony. They treat rivers as living beings. About 2,000 people worldwide still speak Cherokee as a first language. As few as 140 of them live in the Eastern Band. Schools like the New Keetoowah Academy are training new speakers every year. So is the Cherokee Immersion School in Tahlequah. Sequoia's writing system was built from nothing in 1821. That system is now built into every smartphone and computer on Earth. Cherokee teenagers text each other in the same letters. Federal boarding schools once tried to beat those same letters out of their great-great-grandparents. Science didn't discover Cherokee identity. It simply arrived at the banks of a river the Cherokee had never left.